Apologize for being here alone. In the program, we communicated that Tamás Bodoky is going to be here as well. Unfortunately, he's on another conference in Ireland, and I'm hoping he's having as many beers and whiskeys as he can. But here we have to stick to Palinka and stuff. So I'm from atlatszo.hu. For non-Hungarian speakers, this means transparent or see-through, literally. This is a investigative journalism portal that's been founded a little over 2 years ago. And what we do is that we do investigative journalism. That is, we try to uncover wrongdoing mostly related to spending public money. This is what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to cover a little bit the nature of whistleblowing and what this whole thing is. This part of the presentation is not going to be technical in any way, but it really highlights the sort of the root use cases of whistleblowing and why technical tools are needed or how they can help this process. Then I'm going to talk about the existing solutions, and then basically I'm going to explain at length how the tool that we use, which is called GlobaLeaks, works, how it came about, and what can you do to help make it even better. Okay, so whistleblowing. What is whistleblowing? Basically, whistleblowing is when you speak up when you see some kind of wrongdoing, and then you want to have it stopped. This is usually related to you being a member of an organization where you see something that is going wrong, and you're not in a position to fix it yourself. So you try to raise this issue, and then for usually some very internal conviction, basically you escalate this communication further and further and further, and on the edge case of all this, you will end up talking about this issue to people who you've never met before. This is not just about leaking documents. This is basically raising public awareness or raising awareness of something that is really going wrong. Let's have a brief history of famous whistleblowers. These are the typical kind of heroes that we Hungarians identify well with. They are the ones who lose everything. But then they can still die knowing that they did something good. Let's take a look at an older example. In 1969, a guy called Daniel Ellsberg in the US, he basically leaked a bunch of CIA documents, or Pentagon documents to be precise, related to the US involvement in the Vietnam War and basically the false pretext for the war. We have seen in history that sometimes countries go to war based on lies. This happens, unfortunately, way too often. And in retrospect, it's always interesting to see at least, why and how this happened. Of course, regarding the Vietnam case is the Bay of Tonkin incident, which didn't happen, and that was the basis of the US attacking Vietnam, or going into the Vietnam War. This guy, Daniel Ellsberg, he's still alive, which is good for him. And he, since then, he has been advocating sort of conscious whistleblowing ever since. There is no movie about him yet. Frank Serpico, most of you might have seen the movie with Al Pacino about him. He was a police guy in New York. Nothing special. He was, fighting the bad guys. And then he figured that actually the bad guys are his colleagues. And that was quite of a shock for him. Maybe he was too naive when he joined the police force. And he actually paid quite dearly for him raising all the corruption that's going on in the police force and all the intertwinedness of police and criminals and how this kind of sort of mutually beneficial deals are going on there. Basically, all his colleagues, they stopped collaborating with him. Nobody would patrol the streets with him. Like they were patrolling 2 by 2, so he would not have a buddy to patrol with. And at one point, when they were raiding a house full of, or an apartment full of criminals, his body just left him there, which resulted in him being shot in the face. And then he survived, but yeah, it's kind of a bad thing to have. And this was all because he was speaking out openly about wrongdoing in his organization. Do watch the movie. Okay, Mark Felt, 1973. This is a very good case of anonymous whistleblowing. He is the guy who was called the Deep Throat, and not for the movie reasons, or the porn movie reasons, but because he was the anonymous information source for the Watergate scandal. Yeah, there's a movie about this, yes. The character of Mark Felt is not portrayed in the movie. He's only being connected through the phone, but the two journalists are. And do watch it. It's big names again in terms of actors. And Mark Felt, he kept his identity secret for 30 years. He has been only revealed recently in 2005 that he was the one. There's been a lot of speculation, but basically he managed to keep his identity secret. The result of his activities was that, of course, President Richard Nixon of the US, he had to resign. So that's kind of a big impact to have. More recent examples, and these people were selected as Women of the Year by Time magazine. They are Cynthia Cooper, Colleen Rowley, and Sharon Watkin, and they were, this is like, so earlier I talked about people exposing information from public bodies. Some of these are actually commercial entities that we're talking about right now. One was the Enron, corporation called Enron, the other was WorldCom, and the third one is FBI, so that's a public body. And these three people basically seeing perpetuous wrongdoing being done at their organization and being unable to stop it, they finally contact the wider public through the media, and then the impact was also quite severe. I mean, if you all remember the Enron scandal, et cetera, et cetera. And fortunately, they were at that time immediately treated as heroes. So they're a lot of the, or at least Cynthia Cooper from Enron. A lot of the media coverage was very positive because people felt that this kind of an act where you expose a company hiding their income in foreign countries is somehow good. Not the hiding, but the exposure of that. And as you see, they were selected Women of the Year by Time magazine. Of course, they all lost their jobs. They have very big difficulty finding new employment opportunities, and basically, sort of their personal lives are not as nice as you would imagine. But the basic message still is the utility of this activity is great. If there is something which is systematically being done wrong, and people are lied to, and public funds are wasted, and break-ins happen to your adversaries or to your adversary political party's headquarters, or you attack a country for no reason. It's good to know that, because then the public can react according to the true nature of events, as opposed to a massaged set of propaganda that otherwise you would know. But there is a direct conflict here, because for the whistleblower himself, this is a very risky activity. He is, as in the case of Serpico, he is even bound to get personal injuries. He will be, most probably, this person is going to be regarded very badly by his peers, by his colleagues, by his bosses. Most probably he's going to find it extremely difficult to find employment. He's going to lose it. As a starter, he loses his job. He's going to have dragging legal proceedings that he has to cover the legal expenses for. So it's a very difficult activity. But still, we need somehow more people like that. So how can we achieve that? Of course, one kind of approach is that you basically fight for generic transparency, and this could work against the public sector. It doesn't really work with private corporations, but for the public sector, you could argue that they should be more transparent to begin with. So you shouldn't need a whistleblower to expose documents that would be available as it is. And actually, there is a movement in this direction, also in Hungary, but widely available in Europe and the US, the Freedom of Information Act, which is available in all these countries. You can use this act to request information from public organizations that spend public money, and they have to, by law, they have to give this information to you. In reality, we have a lot of experience with this, applying this law in Hungary. In reality, this does mean that you need a lawyer, and you need legal expertise, and you need to have the will to fight when they fight back. Also, interestingly, you need to know what document you're looking for. When you're filing such a request, you have to be very specific on what kind of information you're requesting. Otherwise, the public body is going to say, oh, your request is too broad. We won't serve it. So that could be one part. But until we get there, basically, we need more whistleblowing. Now, in the terms of, in the time of Daniel Ellsberg or Mark Felt, technology use was different than now. Of course, that was 60s, 70s. Files meant paper. Communication meant telephone. But now we have, and you can always use a dead drop system that you can just like anonymous physical mail, for example, that still works. But now, in the year 2013 and beyond, of course, there's a lot of other options that we can go from. So let me show some of the available options and the limitations of that. For example, this form is a intra-corporation whistleblowing form. A lot of companies, and in some countries there's regulations that mandate that countries have to have an internal problem escalation process, basically an internal whistleblowing process. And then they would set up, like on their intranet, they would set up a site like this, and you immediately see the problem with it. Please type in your name and tell me what's wrong. And then hopefully the superior of your superior is going to respond. Depends on corporate culture. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. This is another example. Yeah, this is the European Anti-Fraud Office online form. I have no idea if it works. This is another form with a similar thing. All the problem with this is that it immediately starts, all of these start with them requesting information about you, and you having a huge amount of trust in an empty form. And you don't know who's going to read that and what they're going to do with your information. Starting with your, where you're submitting this from what computer, etc. There is a leak directory project where they are trying to list. Anyway, there is this project where they're trying to list these leaking facilities, and basically it's a wiki, so you can if you know any newer ones, then you can just add them to you, and people could, in theory, go there and look up if the issue they are having, is there any leaking platform which would accept that kind of issue. And then you have various, it's typically an NGO-driven thing, who are trying to work with these. As you see from this list as well, actually the nature of whistleblowing is divided between private corporations, issues within private corporations, and issues within public bodies. We at atlatszo, we are mostly concerned with public bodies, so my presentation mostly cover that area. So what are we using? We are using a tool which is called GlobaLeaks. and it's an open source tool that has been developed by the Hermes Institute, which is basically a bunch of Italian guys spread around the globe. The whole idea of this GlobaLeaks platform is to give you a tool that you yourself can install, or you can use somebody else's instance to provide anonymous means of communication between parties. And as you see on the slide, these were the basic reasons of coming up with this software. So it's free, open source. You can check it out. You can run it yourself, or you can tie up with a bunch of people and you can run your own together. You can review the code. You can improve it, which is always good, especially reviewing. And of course, you can extend it on your own. But I guess all this is quite natural. Let's go in details how this works. So basically, who are the parties involved in such an activity? We have a whistleblower, basically the person who is too fed up with his immediate vicinity that he wants to expose information about something that he believes is wrong. There is a target. The target is the person or the organization you want to send a message to, which in our case is a media organization, or it can be a range of media organizations. But this could work inside a corporation as well. You could say there is a truly anonymous whistleblowing channel which is channeled toward upper management, and then you could basically leak or communicate to them in an anonymous manner as well. And of course, there is this node administrator, basically the guy who is running this particular instance of GlobaLeaks. So yeah, he's the whistleblower, and yeah, and he's our main hope for the future. The targets, in our case, we are the targets as journalists. And then this is the node administrator, and basically he's maintaining this whole GlobaLeaks instance. Okay, how does it work? It works through Tor. And basically this whole thing is implemented as a Tor service. And you could, but we didn't opt to be able to use it through Tor to web, because we thought that's not a good idea. But basically the idea is that you run this GlobaLeaks service as a Tor service, and you make people use a Tor-based browser to access your service. And by doing so, you're quite confident that the IP address of the whistleblower is not exposed to you. Why is this important? You could argue that even in Hungary and most of the countries, actually, there are laws which allow the journalists to hide the source of the information they are working on. So you could say there is no need for real anonymity because the law protects the journalist from exposing the source. Well, in reality, in Hungary, this is only partially true, unfortunately. We did encounter the police on a few occasions, them requesting background info from us, and it's not a nice encounter. And on the other hand, we also know that sometimes there are pressures which are beyond legal pressures. And in case you don't know, and you can prove that you don't know, or you can't know, or even if you wished you did, you couldn't, then these pressures don't work. In the worst case, you still might get into problems, but hopefully your attacker is going to realize that no matter how much pressure he's putting on you, you're just unable to fulfill his request for information on your part. So it starts with Tor, and you're running a Tor service. And basically, people would access your service through a Tor-based web browser, and then they would basically send you some information. This can be text, like they can type stuff in, or they can send you documents. Okay? Now, there is this other guy, the target, right, who the information is targeted at. He uses the same mechanism. He comes back to the GlobaLeaks service through a Tor-based web browser, and he can review the documents that were sent. And then everything is initially stored in this GlobaLeaks instance. The GlobaLeaks guys, they are, I don't know, they like funny names or something, but anyway, they came up with this abbreviation called TULIP, which is basically a temporary unique link to an information provider. This is basically the packet of info that you got. And the nature is that this is temporary, so it's going to be deleted from the server, so you have to like act in a timely manner. And this is the, this is basically the communication that's going on. This is, the storage for this is, it can be anything on the GlobaLeaks server itself. You get a notification when you get a new message, and you yourself, the easiest is email, but you can get other kinds of notifications as well. The framework is very flexible. You can extend it to your own liking. Now, this is how it looks. After you uploaded your data, you get this randomly generated ID. And basically, this is a shared secret. This is a unique ID for that particular conversation. And the idea behind this is that you can come back later, and if you know this number, well, it can be a string as well. If you know this ID, then you can come back, and we can have a two-way conversation with the person. We don't know where he comes from or who he is, or how we could find him in other ways. And this is important so that the communication is not a single shot, single direction communication. If you compare this to a traditional physical, like Dropbox style thing, or the anonymous physical letter, there is no possibility to request information back or request clarifications or provide feedback in any way. Here, we have the possibility to tell the information source, okay, fine, we got it, we looked at it, and we have questions, and we want to know, whatever. We want to clarify some parts. We think some parts is bogus, that kind of stuff. And this is very important. And you can still maintain anonymity and have a two-way conversation, which is very handy. How this is anonymous? Well, we have trust in Tor, basically, and I understand this has limitations, but yeah, but still it works quite well. And of course, it protects both us and the source of the information. Okay, so what happens after our Tor service gets this information that is being sent to us? There's an optional step which is done by the New Yorker magazine in New York, where they encrypt the data immediately. This is an optional step for GlobaLeaks, so you can turn it on if you want to. This will put in an extra layer of security, because even if your GlobaLeaks node is compromised, the data that has been sent to you is safe from the hands of who have compromised it. On the other hand, our name is called atlatszo, or transparent, so I'm not sure if I see a problem with the information that somebody wants to expose being exposed. So we don't actually have it turned on. Yeah. And what is important, though, and that's the last step on this slide, is inadvertently a lot of people, and I'll come back to the non-technical issues of technical whistleblowing or technical leaking, is that a lot of times people can leave a lot of information traces in the documents they send, like their own name, which is automatically saved, like they're using a scanner, or they're just saving Microsoft documents here and there, their own name, their machine's name, IP addresses, organization, and whatever. So basically, there is a feature which tries to remove as many metadata from these documents as possible. And the main reason here is, of course, because that we don't want to be able to know any of this stuff, because then we can be asked to provide this information. Okay, the target, which is in case our news organization, we send and receive comments, and then we can request additional material from the whistleblower himself. Yeah, so basically this is this is just going to be the comparison slides between WikiLeaks and GlobaLeaks. And here, the color blue denotes that everything is done by WikiLeaks when it comes to WikiLeaks. So starting from you contacting them until very end of this stuff being published at The Guardian, basically everything is decided by them. Whereas in the GlobaLeaks environment, these steps are separated. So you have the technical framework, which allows people to send information, and then you have an independent set of people who can be an NGO or journalists, activists, or even the internal affairs division of a corporation. And they can decide themselves if they find this information worthy of acting on or not. It's not, it's not that you're not bound, you're not limited by a single news organization's zeal for attention and them selecting only the most important information that they perceive as most important. So your leak of number 2013 from Hungary is never going to be exposed by them because it's not that important. Here, basically, you can have a lot of targets, and they can decide if they find the information important or not. And this is, of course, this is the basic advantage of having the tool available for everyone instead of just run and facilitated by a single organization. Okay, so who will use GlobaLeaks? The media. That's, in our case, us. It's very handy. You need information to work on investigative journalism. You need to get insider stuff. And a lot of times, you don't need anonymity. A lot of times, people don't care. They don't have much to lose, so they will come forward in a very open manner. But in a lot of times, and this is especially true for lower or middle class employees in an organizations who would have a difficulty if they have lost their job, if it is found out that they are leaking information, or there would be reprisals against them. Then it becomes more and more important for them to be able to send you information in an anonymous manner. And so this is this generic case of the media getting the information out. There's a lot of transparency activism. So this is, I would differ this from media, although atlatszo does both. But basically here it's more activism than media. So basically here these organizations are more activist NGOs, and they are going to collect information en masse, and they are going to create reports. Think K-Monitor in Hungary, or think Transparency International, or private corporations. In a lot of European and countries, and also in the US, actually there are laws which mandate large organizations to have an internal issue escalation mechanism, and they have to, they have to fulfill this criteria from a law. And of course, in some organizations, this is done in a minimalistic manner. So they set up a committee, and they can tick all the checkboxes, and then nothing happens. But some corporations might do it the right way. You never know. And so there's a tool for them that they can just install and they can use, and then that can provide truly anonymous feedback. And think of the implications, though, because sometimes this is not concerning money, or indirectly concerning money. Sometimes this is concerning safety. A lot of the corporate whistleblowing is about safety, either direct safety of the employees of the corporation, or indirect safety in terms of, say, food safety, like food products, if the products of the corporation are, edible or not, or if they are labeled appropriately, be that like, beef or horse, or in terms of like transportation, if the safety standards are not good, then the train will derail at 190 kilometers an hour instead of going at 80. So there are implications in corporations as well, and it can have a big impact literally on people's lives. And of course, this is the wishful thinking part. What if public agencies would use kind of something like that? If this was the case, we wouldn't need to exist. It would be a nice world. Okay, so I did mention that this is open source, so you can check it out on GitHub. You can fork it, you can change it, and it uses a number of dependencies. It's a modularized code base. It has a backend aspect, which is the Tor service, and it has a what is called GA client. You can go to GitHub and check it out. The backend is basically a RESTful API, which allows you to do the basic submission, notification kind of scenario, storage. And then you have the client, which is an HTML5 JavaScript client, which calls this RESTful API. So it's a very simple, straightforward web service setup. The whole idea is, of course, that you can, because it's a RESTful API, you can have any client. You could write your own clients for whatever specific needs you have. And there is a fax to social dependency here. We don't use it in particular, but in theory, fax. I don't know. I never used fax myself, so I don't know if this is important. But some people say this machine still exists. So anyway, so if you would have an interface where people could submit through a fax, then this part would work for you. Tor to web, I would advise against it, but basically this allows you to lose a lot of the security for convenience, because this would allow for a regular web browser to access your Tor service through Tor. But it also means that if the people are watching the leaker himself or his machine, then it's quite obvious what he's doing. So it's not, we turned it off. Anyway, you can just go to the website and check it out, and anything you can do in an open source software stack. So I'm going to finally talk a little bit about our instance, which we call it Magyar Leaks. For non-Hungarians, Magyar is Hungarian in Hungarian, and Leaks is leaks. We launched this March, and this was the first GlobaLeaks instance from the new version 0.2. The previous version, 0.1, it had quite serious flaws, but still it was used very effectively in the country of Bulgaria through the site called Balkan Leaks. And the journalists who used it, their activity contributed to the Bulgarian government falling down and them having to have new elections. So it was still a useful tool. Yeah, we're going to go through here, and it's in Hungarian because it meant for the Hungarian audience. This is basically our step-by-step guide of what you need to do if you want to send us some documents. And this is actually, these are just like parts of the documentation that we have on our own website. So I just copied them here. So basically the first thing you need to do is you need to get yourself a Tor browser. Fortunately enough, there is a Tor browser bundle. You go to your website, you download it, you don't need to install it. It works on Mac, Linux, and even Windows. Fine, you can even go to a cyber cafe and just run it. Great. Then, second step, oh, it's in small letters. You need to start a Tor browser. Wow, that's cool. And of course, you have to verify that you're actually browsing through Tor. The third one is, and interestingly, this is a very difficult part of the whole process, though it should be the most simple one. You need to direct your Tor browser to our GlobaLeaks instance. Sounds simple, right? But anyone who has actually worked with Tor before, we all know that onion URLs are random generated strings, and it's difficult to memorize them, and there is no way of getting a nice URL from them. And for this reason, we are gonna actually supply like small, like stickers and small, like business card size leaflets, so that you can take this address with you, because it's a gibberish like series of letters that nobody will ever memorize. So you point your Tor browser to our platform, and then you basically fill out the upload form. So like steps 4, 5, and 6, they are click, next, upload. It's very simple. And then on step 7, you just say submit. Nice. And then you remain paranoid. That's step 8. Now, having come to the red part of this whole thing, let me talk a little bit about the non-technical issues that we need to communicate very well, and we do, where we try our best, is that by performing these steps, you are indeed sending us documents in a way that we can't trace the origins for. Even if we wanted to, we don't know where it's coming from, except if you put this information into the data itself, right? So if you put your name in, if you leave metadata in the documents, if you leave, traces in scanned documents like stamps and stuff, if the scanning software that you used automatically puts your name into the PDF that it's saving, if the Word document has all the organizational, like even your room number as a metadata in it, there's a lot of stuff that can be in these documents which could point to yourself. And this can be a problem. The other thing is, of course, if you're sitting in your nice office and you're typing in magyarleaks.hu in your web browser, it might be that your internal IT staff is going to track you down. So never do this at home. Okay, but then how do I get the documents out of the office? Of course, it depends on the level of IT security implemented within your organizations. A lot of organizations, even if you put in a memory stick, then a red light is going to shine somewhere, right? So you have to be very careful, but we can't really be specifically helpful in this case because we don't know the organization the person is working at. But we need to communicate that even though this step of the whole process of us not knowing the source is true, all the other risks are still there, and people have to be very careful. Because in these cases, you don't need proof. If in an organization, only if somebody is suspected, they can get into trouble. They can get fired, or worse. So even though there is a partial solution for anonymous leaking, people have to do every steps to make sure that they don't give away themselves. Thank you.